Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, coaching for success in sport and business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. I have the pleasure today of interviewing David Sammel, who is an author, coach, consultant, mentor, lover, similar to myself with the tennis background, and of course going into the boardroom and helping leaders, especially around mindset. And he's coached dozens of professional players on the tour, etc. So we're going to talk about mental skills. We're going to talk about his book, of course, The Locker Room Power, Building an Athlete's Mind. So such important topics, but we always start with a pattern break question. So I'm going to go with cricket. Do you prefer to bat or bowl?
Bat.
Without hesitation, he's he's blocked one back straight away.
I played quite a lot of cricket when I was young, and I was primarily a batsman. So
yeah, lover of all ball sports. So I read in your background, you did grow up in quite a big family, and your parents adopted some kids, and so take me back to growing up in South Africa and growing up in a large family. How did that shape who you are today?
Interesting question. I think the biggest thing you subconsciously learn is how to negotiate. And it's negotiating time from your parents, negotiating with brothers and sisters. You don't realize that you're negotiating, but you actually are. And I think within such a big family with so many diverse personalities, you kind of have those that are a bit prickly, and then you have the peacemakers, and you have, the quieter ones and stuff. And I think as I was growing up, I developed peacemaking skills, which again, you don't realize it when you're young, but I often found myself kind of between, arguments or whatever, and kind of helping reason come about, and for my siblings, and and even sometimes between my parents and my siblings, try to bring a voice of reason. The downside of that was, I think in my 20s, went away to college in America, and enjoyed playing tennis and did pretty well. And I would come home, and I came home with an arrogance that kind of, I knew it all, and my parents didn't know shit, and I can make peace here, and I can have this overview of what's happening in life just from my few weeks at home, and fix all problems. And obviously, as you get older, and that, I do kind of regret that a little bit, in terms of, you don't know what you don't know. But I didn't realize, obviously, with such a big family, there's a lot of pressure in a family like that, because obviously financially and everything like that, it's 10 children is. I think when my parents first adopted kids and everything like that, it was a slightly different world, and then you had inflation hitting, and different demands. Some of the adopted kids had learning difficulties, so I had to go to special schools. And I think my dad did extremely well financially, but actually spread between so many people, it was still a struggle. And you don't have an understanding of that when you're a kid. And I think sometimes when I came back, without realizing it, I would either maybe put unnecessary pressure on them, or almost guilt trip them a little bit, like, because, they had so many plate spinning and everything like that, it's funny, having been like the peacemaker, sort of, when I left, I'd come in like a hand grenade and create some problems where I thought I was still making peace. But the good thing is, I think if you're a person who's self-aware and everything like that, you reflect on things and you come out of these things. So, but what I'd also say is in South Africa growing up, which was a big influence on my life, is we had no TV growing up. So TV first hit South Africa in 1978. So, and even then it was test programs and only 4 hours in the evening, like from 4 to 8. Dallas was the big program. And therefore growing up without TV means that you're outdoors all the time. Sport became pretty much everything. My love of sport came from the fact that you just played so much, because kind of what else was there to do? You weren't going to have it. And even on the weekends, you weren't going to sit around watching TV or whatever, and in the summers we'd play, till the sun went down at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And growing up in Johannesburg in the winter, the weather is actually pretty awesome. It never rains, blue skies almost all the time, and very little wind. So all sports, even in the winter, could get nippy sometimes, pretty cold. But overall, it was very pleasant. And of course, with so many siblings, I had a lot of people to play different sports against all the time.
Yeah. I want to take a bit of a deeper dive into this concept of, giving advice and like fixing people's problems. And, I started tennis coaching at 14. And so I was employed to go in and fix things. Now, many, many years later, I have a slightly different approach, obviously, in the way I coach people. So how did what's your take on the amount of instruction that we give people when we're coaching versus helping them find the answer that lives within themselves, especially as you were, the glue of the family and the problem solver at times. Did you evolve yourself as a coach with regards to the way that you use language?
Oh, hugely, hugely. I think when I first stopped, well, I never just stopped playing tennis. I kind of evolved into coaching. So, my first real coaching experience was I got to the finals of a tournament in Belgium in St. Niklaas, and then they asked me if I'd come and do 2 junior tennis camps with them at the end of the summer. And the way I could make money playing tennis was with money tournaments in Europe. And then I started playing for a Dutch club, which was the staple of my income. And a lot of time I'd end up blowing all that income playing, satellites, trying to improve a world ranking. And then when I was running out of money, have to go back into the money tournament circuit. And obviously, the club was good for me. And I think it was 1986 or 87. The club called me. I remember I was playing a tournament in the Canary Islands and said, would you come a bit earlier and become player coach for the first three teams? Because I'd already captained the team. And I thought, well, yeah. And I mean, it was more money and it seemed a pretty good thing to do. So I did that. And that was my first real coaching of, pretty high level players. And actually enjoyed that, even though I played for the team as well. And we started doing really well. And then the following year, they said, well, could you coach the top 3 teams and the 2 junior teams? And so it became almost like a summer coaching job, even though they allowed me to play some money tournaments as well. So it was kind of the best of both worlds. I would say that I was already aware that coaching cannot be my way or the highway. You needed to talk to players and get to know them as people. And that would be the best way forward. But if I look back, that idea was there, but still on the tennis court, it was kind of, this is what you need to do. And especially with the juniors. And I do think even now that I've evolved a long way from that place, that with juniors, rather than telling them what to do, is you need to ask the right pointed questions, and that help them discover their way, but knowing where you're trying to get to, because they're not that sophisticated in terms of understanding their game in tennis. But when you talk about working with pros and really high level juniors at ITF level and everything, almost all of it is a collaboration and a discussion about, okay, this is what I feel is going on here, or even asking them, what do you feel is going on here? I'm sure you've come to the same places as me, as you get further and further down this, it becomes more and more about just saying the right thing at the right time, rather than telling, well, you just can't tell anybody to do anything, because that's never going to be successful, especially at a high level. It's a discussion, and a lot of the time, with pros, you're just a sounding board for them to talk things through. And then, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is to get permission. So if there's something that's happening that I really feel has to be tackled, then I will say to a player, would you like to hear my opinion on the subject? And if they say no, you got to just shut up and say, okay, that's fine. But invariably they'll say yes, because they're curious and they want to get better. And then when you offer your opinion, they've already given you permission. And I think it's a very, very powerful tool, that and very necessary the more sophisticated the players are. Questions are hugely important. I also think in technique, I think a lot of coaches dive into technique, and I think aesthetics are one thing. What's effective is something different. And what I will say is this, is in tennis anyway, backswing is aesthetics, unless it prevents the player from hitting the ball in front. So if they have a huge swing and they hit it late all the time, then maybe you need to do something about the swing. But if they have a huge swing, but they time it beautifully, don't mess with it, because it's all about just before contact and in the follow through. And it's weird, because the follow through does affect what happens on contact. So follow through is not aesthetics. Follow through can have a big impact on what happens on contact. And I think a lot of younger coaches want things to look right and look nice. And before you do that, you need to figure out if they're being actually effective or not, because there's a lot of strokes you'd see on the pro tour that are effective, yet you wouldn't say necessarily traditionally, aesthetically beautiful. But at the business end of the shot, it's very, very good. And I think the more experiences you get as a coach, the more you look at what's effective rather than what it looks like. Three things I think are incredibly important in technique. And one is balance. The second thing is looseness. So, to play good, you have to be loose. And often you'll see players, suddenly in one area, the shoulder comes up as a bit tight. And if you just ask them, in that shot, where do you feel tight or tension? And they'll tell you. It's like, okay. And it's amazing. You don't even have to say anything often. They're just aware of it and then and then it starts to feel better, and they, oh, okay, and you haven't told them to do, don't tell them to lower your shoulder. So where's the tension, And then the third thing is feel of the ball. And that comes from the hands and the wrist. So you have a lot of people who have lovely strokes, and they hit the ball beautifully, everything looks fantastic, but the ball doesn't go in the court. That, they're very erratic. And it's because the ball comes out of the strings way too fast and they're not feeling the ball. Well, if you're not feeling the ball with, average string, you're definitely not going to feel it even with good string. So, learn how to, let's see, how much are you feeling the ball? And when players start to feel the ball, control improves a lot. So, if a player's balanced and they're loose and they're feeling the ball, you get those three things in place, and it's amazing how much a player can improve just from being aware of those things. The last thing I use, which is a very good coaching tool as well, is, especially as an adult, you're stronger than the ball. So if on a return a serve, a player's coming up like, the reason they're coming up is not because the ball is bullying them and forcing them up. It's a mental thing. And I say, never let the ball bully you out of balance. You're stronger than the ball. Another thing that really came from baseball, which is the most important thing for a batter in baseball, is to, and in cricket as well, is to read the ball. See exactly what's happening. And the focus to read the ball from the throw or from the arm turning over is huge in being able to bat well. Well, for me in tennis, reading the ball, and of course top players are so used to, they don't realize how well they're reading the ball. But the best movers in the world read the ball the best, which means they might start just a touch earlier, therefore they're in better position. Therefore, they've got time on the ball. And everybody says when you see somebody great at anything, they have time on the ball. Well, the reason they have time on the ball is because they read the ball better and they get in position a little bit earlier. One of the easiest ways to practice even just hitting up and down the middle is, read the ball, read when it's short, read when it's coming deep, higher, And if you're hitting with them, you can give them different shapes and see how well they're picking it up.
Well, thank you for sharing so many great practical tips out there already, especially for our tennis coach listeners. What about for business coaches? There are even a lot of great things in what you said. Sometimes, when we want to close a deal in business, we're holding on too tight. And just relaxing into letting go of the outcome can also, help us close a deal better, read the energy of the room in business, and be on balance with your message. So I think I've just taken your three concepts and throw them over to the business world. I wanted to ask you, so staying on that theme in helping business coaches and leaders, I know that you do a lot of work in developing mental strength and a winning attitude. So what can these business leaders and coaches who you work with learn from the mental strength and the winning attitude? What does that mean to you?
And I happen to coach a number of people in business, and the things that translate really, really well is helping them learn for their people to ask good questions as well. Well, there's two sides, I think, in working in businesses. One is leading people, managing people, and the other side is personal development. On the personal development side, I think business, even very successful business people, are just like athletes. There is insecurity there, there's doubts, there's fears. And one of the things that really translates is whether you're an athlete in any sport or in business, from my experience, the very best are the most relaxed and the bravest. It's one thing knowing something, it's another thing implementing. And implementing is where the bravery comes. If in business somebody knows that they need to do something, but there might be pushback, People might not believe, you got to sell it to them. But if you really believe in it, you have to be brave enough to take that step and implement. When we talk about feel, you have to keep taking the temperature, reading the room as to what's going down, what's not working, and tackle that. Certainly with the key people, a leader needs to have a minimum once a quarter, a 45, 50-minute one-to-one. But this one-to-one is not just purely talking about the business. It's actually talking with them as people. What are their, finding out good questions. What are their ambitions? How do they see themselves in 5 years' time? And if it's not with your company, that's fine, because that's actually natural. And if you've done a really good job, people should get headhunted. But in knowing them as people and then asking great questions like, if you were in my position, what would be the one thing, the burning one thing that you would do differently? What would you change? Or what would you do more of? Or what would you stop doing? And that way, people come with great ideas. And then the big key, when somebody comes with a great idea, you need to implement it. If it totally makes sense that it's going to improve things, the faster you implement it, the faster you build incredible trust, because the person feels unbelievably valued and heard. And I also think if you're a leader of a large company, once a month, have a one-to-one with somebody at every level of the company, right down to the cleaners, because you will hear from them and they're going to buy into your vision because they feel heard. And whilst it seems like a very long route to have these, it's the shortest route possible to real sustained success, because people feel like they have an input. And if they come with a suggestion that can't work, you need to explain to them why it can't work at that point in time. Maybe it's budget, maybe it's doesn't fit quite, and try to explain to them how it doesn't fit quite with the vision. They still feel heard then, and because other people have had great ideas implemented, they know that you're genuine in turning something down because it doesn't work for whatever reason. Most relaxed and bravest, the more you have these conversations, the more relaxed you get with everybody involved. You get that relaxed confidence also feeds through. The other thing I have with business people is actually a lack of confidence. I talk a lot to them about owning their own space. And owning your own space is how you present yourself. And again, the bravery there comes from looking at something logically and saying, is what I'm thinking reasonable? And if you have somebody to bounce that idea off that you believe is a reasonable person, you can start to draw boundaries based on logic and obviously your feelings of what is right and for you. So, as an example, if, is it right on Friday at 4 o'clock, somebody says, come in on Saturday, I need you in tomorrow. Such late notice? I don't think so. However, that doesn't mean every time, because if there's an absolute emergency, you'll know that it's all hands on deck, and coming in on Saturday is not an unreasonable ask. But if it's just to get more stuff done, no, it's an unreasonable time scale to mess with your weekend, as an example. And you can own your own space and say, this is not an emergency. If you want me for a Saturday for something specific, I need far more notice. Because once people start owning their own space and being able to create reasonable boundaries, then they feel a lot better about themselves. And it is the only way to stand up to bullies, by creating these boundaries. I've kind of covered both there.
Leading people and the personal development side of being a leader. One of my favorite Gandhi quotes is, "There go my people, I must follow them, for I am their leader." What a wonderful quote that is, because it really does summarize both of what you said. The better you spend on your own personal development and understanding yourself, you mentioned self-awareness earlier, then you're going to be able to lead people. And so how do you do that with a winning attitude? Like, what is a winning attitude? What does that mean to you?
A winning attitude to me is accepting failure as the way you learn. And the only way you learn is by implementing, being brave enough to implement and fail, implement and fail, implement, and actually, this is starting to work. Yeah, the other thing is the way you present yourself. So, we talk to athletes all the time about body language. Well, body language in the office counts for a lot. You walk with, your head held high, shoulders in a good position. All of these things have a bearing, but also with a relaxed confidence. I tell you, another big part of that I come across a lot is there's such a huge difference between management and delegation. So many business people think that they're delegating, but actually they're not. What they're doing is delegating and then overseeing, managing. Well, then it's not delegation. Delegation is, I trust you to do a job. So you get the job. Get on with it. Okay? I also trust that if there's a problem that you need help with, that you'll come and ask. But I'm not going to check up on you in any way at all. The only thing I'll say is, if you're struggling with anything and need help, don't keep quiet, ask. But you have the responsibility for the project then, completely. And I think a lot of leaders waste a huge amount of time and energy overseeing. The higher you are in leadership, the more strategic you become. And therefore, you don't have to worry about these things. And actually, a lot of the job is in your head then. It's not actually working. A lot of your job, really, a great leader actually is a great coach. Because a great leader will spend all his time meeting with his people, talking to them, finding about the one thing that needs to happen, finding about their ambitions, helping inspire them. That is actually great leadership. Great leadership is great coaching. Great leadership is not great managing.
Yep.
And that's a huge, huge difference.
Yeah.
And the thing is, leaders sometimes feel like they need to lead. That means be seen to be doing something. And that something usually is interfering.
Yeah.
If you're coaching your people, if you're spending time, just talking to them and feeling what's going on, you will actually know more about the business and what's actually happening than if you micromanaging loads of people and trying to control everything. The whole point of delegation is, you control nothing. You allow people to do their job and inspire and help them do the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, great leaders. Yeah, he or she we mentioned.
Yes.
But you summarize practice 1 in my book, which is decision making. So a great coach is someone who empowers others with the skills to be able to make great decisions. And it's based on my holy grail question of coaching, which I throw over to you now, which is in 1 to a maximum of 3 words. What do you think makes a great coach?
Listening, empathy, and inspiration towards a vision. I think you can't inspire someone without a vision. Whether it's your vision as a leader or as a coach, understanding what their vision is and inspiring them consistently towards that. On the back of that, when we talk about owning your own space, which I spoke about earlier, if somebody knows where they're trying to go, decisions become easier, because when you have to make a decision, the only decision to make is, does this take me closer to where I'm trying to go or further away? And if it's taking you closer, then that's the decision. But if you don't have that vision, you can't inspire someone towards that vision.
So speaking of vision, what disruptive idea do you have, or that keeps you awake at night, that you think is really going to impact coaching in 2030?
I think AI is going to have a huge impact, because what it's going to allow coaches to do, and it's already starting, is collate huge amounts of data and information from discussions like this and condense it into manageable bites that they can help. And again, the AI will be distinctively the coach's personality because of the way the questions are asked of AI and the way the information is interpreted. And that is still the talent of the coach. But to be able to, have, 500 coaching sessions and ask for the 5 main themes from 500 coaches sessions is incredibly valuable data. I also think by 2030, I think the world is already changing. Top athletes all have coaches. Why? Not because they don't know what they're doing. It's because, in a way, everybody needs a wingman, somebody to bounce ideas off, somebody to make sure that they're being reasonable, to make sure
Or a wing woman.
Yeah, sorry, I
That's all right.
need to keep that in mind. But yeah, and I think women have a huge strength, because generally women have a natural empathy that often, men don't have. And I think, that's one of the 3 things. And I think that's a huge strength that women bring to the party, because they have a natural empathy. And often women read situations or people very quickly and better than men. And those are all huge skills that are in the coaching profession.
Yep, absolutely. So finally, I'd like to mention your book, Locker Room Power. You've written several books, but this one is Building an Athlete's Mind is a powerful tool, and you share your step-by-step process with your winning formula. So could you share maybe 1 or 2 tips from that book?
Yeah, I mean, locker room power exists, and whether it's in the boardroom or on a tennis court or a cricket pitch or netball, it's the aura that champions have, which allows them to win a lot or have a huge advantage before they even play. And you can build that. But also being aware of locker room power is also the antidote against it. So if you've got a young challenger coming through and they're made aware of the the feelings that they're going to have walking on with somebody who's got huge aura and locker room power, it can help them understand it and be able to, before they go out there, prepare themselves to combat it. The formula is also very much based on building your strengths. And what I say about weaknesses is you don't have to spend that much time on weaknesses, but you do have to spend enough time on them so they don't prevent you from using your strengths. And remember, every strength in a different situation is a weakness. So I'll give you a very quick example that I'm a big guy. I walk in a room, I have presence, and naturally people are a little bit wary of me. And it's a huge strength because it commands respect very quickly. But if you walk into a room and you're trying to make friends and influence people and have to be friendly and not have that little bit of awareness, then that strength is actually a weakness in that situation. So, and there's plenty of sporting situations where strength can actually be a weakness, and also in business. So be aware that a lot of strengths are contextual and a lot of weaknesses are contextual. Sometimes being, one of the things I talk about is introversion, which is, people think you can't be successful or some people think you can't be successful if you're an introvert. But actually, there's no such thing as introversion, because introverts, if you put them in the right situation with their friends and everything like that, can be actually very extrovert. So again, the context of that is the more comfortable someone is, probably the more extrovert they're going to be. So if you're introverted, you just need to expand the areas where you put yourself in over and over again until you become comfortable, and you just expand that, and slowly but surely. And you can see it where some introverts start out and then they become a huge leader and they become actually very extrovert. And I'd say that Roger Federer is a great example of that in his early days, he was not the Roger Federer that you know now. And you see that with political leaders sometimes. When they start out, they're not as extrovert, but as they get the confidence and stuff like that, they get more and more comfortable at owning their own space. The book delves into that. It delves into how you build locker room power, and it goes into things like desire as well, which is a big part of ambition and succeeding. So all of that comes together to build locker room power, and locker room power is a very, very valuable commodity.
Yep, couldn't agree more. And if you can set that right from the beginning, the tone, the feeling, the values, the behaviors of what and who you stand for, as you said, decision making becomes easier, the vision becomes more powerful, and people can delegate roles and responsibilities to each other. I mean, pretty much you just summarized this episode, or I did. I'm not sure which.
Yeah.
But
I'll just say two more
yes,
things that come
please.
from the book. Is one, I say in there, paint the dream, then forget about it. And what I mean by that is you have the ultimate vision, but then if it's Everest, you know where you're aiming for, but then you got to work at conquering the foothills. And you're not ready to conquer Everest until you get to very close, until it's really the next step. You're aware of where you're going, okay? And the other thing I say in the book, and say a lot of, is do the work and good things will happen. You just never know when. And human beings tend to be impatient. They always think they're ready before they actually are. But you need to trust that if you just keep doing the work, the good stuff will happen, but very rarely on your timing. Often when it seems like it's never going to happen, you need to just keep going because you might be very close.
I think you just summarized my life then. That's exactly how I feel about my journey.
Yeah, fabulous. I got a question for you. The three things that make a great coach, what would your three be?
Mine are energy, empathy, and enjoyment. The three E's. I think energy is one of our resources that is untapped. The energy of conversation, being able to read energy, being able to utilize energy, the flow,
The energy of focus.
the energy of focus, the energy between two people to bring out the best in ourselves and in the other person. I think you have to do that with empathy. Empathy's been something, you and I both are aligned, very aligned with. How do you improve your empathy on a daily basis? Because every time I meet a new person is an opportunity for me to learn about their culture, their background. That's why I started with your backstory in this interview, to understand a little, even just a small snapshot of how you grew up, and then enjoyment. I have fun interviewing you. It's a joy to chat about coaching and our shared love of tennis and now what we're doing. And I think when I coach with enjoyment and I bring even a sense of fun and a sense of play and a sense of joy, people get on board with, even the most difficult things can be enjoyable to work through, as you said, when you do the work. So
I mean, it's a fabulous one, that, and I think maybe it's something I take for granted a little bit, is I love what I do, so I don't find it difficult to enjoy what I'm doing. But yes, it's a huge thing to enjoy it, and thank you very much for sharing that, because it's a great reminder to me that, yeah, enjoyment, if you're not enjoying it, wow, it's a huge difference.
Well, I appreciate that last pointed question. With self-awareness, balance, feeling loose, and that freedom of that was relaxed confidence was two key words that came up in this episode. And of course, always asking for permission. So David Sammel, thank you so much for being on the Coaching Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And everybody else, thank you so much for listening.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and US college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.